So, okay. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them, or I'll be around after class for a while to talk to students. Um, but today, we're going to be going over Amazon Web Services. Um, so for those of you who don't know what that is, Amazon Web Services are just kind of a generic set of services, or I guess maybe they're more. Some of them are more specialized at creating and running web services. Um, so we're going to talk about three of them in particular today. However, there are many, many more services that they have available. These just seem like some of the primary ones of interest that are maybe most useful for you. Um, so you're not going to be required to use these. However, if you wanted to like host your final projects or things like that, this might be a good place to look, especially since, um, as I'll explain, there is a free tier available for Amazon Web Services. We'll get into what some of these numbers mean for um, what's available as a free service. Um, to do just like the generic free service, you do have to like associate a credit card with it in case you like go over like what's freely available. Um, However, as a student, you can also apply for what's called AWS Educate, which allows you to get free credits or like free computing credits, like I think about $100 worth supposedly, as a student to use these services with, or to use for these services. So that's an option for you, and hopefully, as you'll see, these are fairly useful. Um, there's a link at the end of the presentation that goes to AWS Educate, or you can just Google search for it. I tried to create one for myself as an educator, but I ran into some sort of bug that I haven't been able to work out, but I think you should be able to figure it out as students pretty easily. Okay, so um, the first service we're going to talk about is called Elastic Cloud Compute, or colloquially known as EC2. So generally, this is the service that AWS provides that just allows you basically to provision a generic virtual computing resource. Basically, you can just get like a virtual computer that you can log into. Um, you can run programs on it. You can host node applications. You can um, and it's publicly accessible from the web, so you can use it to basically host whatever you want or provide whatever service you want. You can run Linux, you can run Windows. They also have different pre-configured environments set up for specific platforms. Like you can get like a pre-provisioned node server, I'm pretty sure. You can get one to run Mongo, um, a whole bunch of different things. So just to kind of give you an idea of how this works, um, I'm going to try to run a demo of starting up a server. Um, so I'm going to try to do 3 different demos today. So just bear with me. All of these are sort of, they're small demos, but hopefully they should give you an idea of how you can use AWS. So let me get out of here. All right, so first thing that you're going to want to do is if you want to log into what's called the S3 console. So let's see, or not S3, the AWS console. Here, you can sign into console. I'm already signed in and created an account. But so basically, once you're here, you can come up here to the services page, which there are, as you can see, there's a whole bunch of different services that are available. So we're just going to talk about EC2, Lambda, and S3. However, there are many available. There's quite a few available that support different like database services that Amazon provides, or you can run something like Lambda, like I said, or SQL on these servers, Postgres. Um, but okay, so we're going to look at EC2 first. Um, so right now I have one running instance, which I was just working with yesterday as a example. But I'm going to try to basically show you how I can set up a new one. So we're going to go ahead and launch instance. So basically, I have a lot of different options here. Can run SUSE, Ubuntu, um, Red Hat, so that's like Fedora, or I guess just actually just plain Red Hat. And this like Amazon Linux, which we're going to actually just use that at. We're going to set up one of these. So let's see, I think this first one is the one I want to do. So we'll do a 64-bit x86 instance, so select that. We're just going to do this free tier eligible micro version, which just has like one virtual CPU, 1 gig of memory, low network performance requirements. You can, you can instantiate very large services on here. So, with 8 cores and 32 gigs of memory, and I'm sure you can get a lot more than that. But we're just going to do this micro version because it's free. So go ahead and do that, and go ahead and hit launch. Okay, so I'm going to go through this process of creating a new key pair. So the way that you can actually log into these is just going to be through console, like you would with the computing resources that you use here at the university. It's just like a Linux shell, and you log in with SSH. However, there's a requirement that you use a private public key pair to do that login process. So I'm just going to set up that so you can see how that works. So create a new pair. Just saying, download key pair. Okay. So launch instances. Okay, so those things are launches. They're launching. So while that's going, I'm going to try to show how to set up this key, at least in PuTTY for those of you that are on Windows. If you're in Mac or if you're running Linux, you're going to have to set up the key with SSH on your own. I can potentially help you figure that out if you need me to, but I don't have that environment in front of me right now. So, okay, so in Windows, what you're going to want to do is download PuTTY, but you also need a utility that comes with PuTTY called PuTTyGen. So what we want to do here is we want to load, actually load the key that we just got, which is this in-class example.pem. So this .pem file, which we have to create a file that's actually compatible with PuTTY, which .pem isn't. So we're just going to open that. It says we successfully imported foreign key. So basically, we're going to see do what this says. To use this key in PuTTY, you need to install, need to use the save private key to save it to PuTTY's format. So hit OK. Hit save private key. We'll do that without passphrase protect it. You could add one if you want, but we'll just say so in class example. So okay, and then we hit save. Okay, and so that should create a this PuTTY key that we can use. So we'll open up PuTTY. All right, and to actually go to this instance. So this is the DNS record name for our instance. So to connect to it, we want to hit copy. And let's see, I'm trying to remember. Okay, EC2 user. So what we're going to actually want to do is we want to say EC2-user as our username for when we log into into this service, and then we want to use say @ and then the host name for this EC2 instance. And because we're using a particular key, we need to go into the configurations for PuTTY, go to auth, and we need to browse and we need to select the private key file that we want to use to log into that. So just go ahead and hit open, or actually session, and we'll say this is going to be my second example of it. So we'll just hit save, and hopefully this opens. We just want to say yes. We want to go and log in, use that key. All right, and so basically we've created a blank Amazon Linux virtual machine that we can log into. It's basically free for us to set up whatever we want. So I'm going to just go ahead and try to get like a node instance running on here. You have to do a little bit of setup for that. So there's actually a pretty useful tutorial on how to get Node installed. We're going to use it using this NVM utility, which stands for Node Version Manager, which actually helps us swap between the different versions of Node pretty easily. But basically, all we have to do is just copy pasta these commands and put them in the command line over here. So this curl is just downloading an install script for NVM and running it. So we'll hit that. Let's see, we have to do this command to make sure that it is, I think it just configures NVM, and then we want to install Node using NVM. So this just downloads and installs Node. So now we should have an instance of Node available here. All right, and we can see like what version of Node is running by basically just running this struggle command here. And so yeah, indeed, we're running with version 13.12.0 on Node. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and try to set up like the socket.io example that I did before with the simple chat. So let's try to do that. Example. That's it. Okay, so we're in here. And so I'm actually going to copy over some code. Use WinSCP. It actually loads in, didn't load in this time, so let's see. We should be able to advance. So we want to copy basically the same settings from PuTTY. Copying the host name that we got from AWS, and our username. Let's see, PuTTY terminal settings, authentication. So we want to select our private key that we were using before. And okay. Say yes. Okay, so we're logged into this same server again using SFTP so we can transfer some files. So let's do, so I have this socket.io example from before, so we'll just go and copy that in. And we'll copy that here. Okay, so we have that going. Let me see if I can. Session settings, change settings. Can I change? Appearance. Let's see, change. I'm just going to change the font size up a little bit so that y'all can see better. Okay, so we have all of our node files in here. Let's see, cat index. Let's see. Right, so this is just a simple app where we basically have Express and Socket.io. We serve up some the index.html file, and we have basically we handle one socket message that is just cat message that goes back and forth, and we listen on port 3000. Let's see, so we need to do install to get all of our packages. And then we should just be able to run node this. So this is now listening on port 3000. And okay, so we now have a node instance running on a public server. So what we should be able to do is look at our running instances on EC2. If we copy our second one, let's see. Okay. So hopefully what we're going to be able to do is go look at this node instance. So we copy the URL for our instance, go to port 3000, and it's not going to work because we have to actually manage the security firewall settings for our server. So to do that, we look at our running instances here, and if we want to configure the security, which is basically the firewall for the server, we need to go to the security groups, launch wizard-2, which is the one for this EC2 instance. Go here, click on security group ID, and so right now we have only one inbound rule, which allows SSH connections, which are on port 22, to come into this machine, but it doesn't allow anything else. So if we want to open up port 3000 so that we can connect to it, we need to do edit inbound rules. Can add a rule, and so this one will be, we'll say it's custom TCP, it's port 3000, and then basically we have to say like what IP addresses we want to allow. We'll just say this one, which is all connections. So this we'll do save rules. Okay, and now just make sure that this is still up. It is. So now we should be able to go over here, and we have our chat example open. So it actually opened up our chat, so we can do chat. And so what's interesting about this is actually on like the public internet. So if I send this link to y'all, which don't make me regret doing. But let's see, where's the chat? So I can chat in, I put the chat in the Zoom for this service, so you can actually go there yourself and you can send messages if you want to. You should be able to connect to that. Let's see, hey, it works. Other people are able to access it, looks like. So yeah, so that's just a very quick and dirty way to basically start up a virtual machine on EC2. You can actually run things on port 80 and port 443 for SSL. You do have to run Node as a super user to do that. So it's a little bit more of a pain. But if you're wanting to basically run Node and put some of your applications online, this is a way that you can do it. And the free service for Amazon lets you run like one of these small, like single core instances, like a month. Like it lets you do that for, I think the free service is for like 12 months. And you can basically use that to just host whatever you want with Node, although you're not going to be able to handle like a ton of traffic considering it's a fairly small instance. But so does anyone have any questions about using EC2 that I can potentially answer? I kind of just ran through that really quickly, but I have a couple more demos that I wanted to show.
Professor,
Yes.
can you show me the starting steps how to install this? Actually, I just missed a few things initially.
For installing Node.
EC2 connectivity.
Sorry, can you be more specific, VJ? Like, what did you miss?
EC2 connectivity, web services, starting point.
Right. So, like, how to log into it?
Yeah.
Like once you create it. Okay. So let's see, which one of these is the panel? Okay. So if you go to the EC2 panel here, you click on running instances. So whenever you created the instance, it basically gives you the option to create a new SSH or a new, was it like OpenSSL key pair that you download. So whenever you get that, so in my case, I just saved it as this in class key example.pem,
Okay.
which is a file that contains that that key value pair. So I'll make a mistake and show it to y'all. So basically, it's just a file that has a RSA private key in it. So you can use that as a way to authenticate SSH. And so for PuTTY, you have to use the PuTTYGen tool to basically convert that into a private key format that PuTTY can use by loading that file here, and then you save private key. Then once you have that, you can log into PuTTY by specifying the DNS address for your virtual machine here, and you use the username EC2-use. So it's SSH, it's on port 22. And then with SSH, you have to configure authenticating with a private key. So in PuTTY, you just do that here. I believe it's like a command line option in Linux to specify the key file that you want to use. And so you do that, and then that you should just be able to open the connection at that point, and it uses a key file to authenticate you. You don't use like a password, a username password. You're using the SSH keys there. So if I hit open, it'll log me in, and I can then do whatever I want with the instance. And like I said before, you can create instances that are of other flavors of Linux or Windows, but the Amazon one is just sort of like the default.
What about the Mac?
So to log in with the Mac, you'd have to use the command line SSH tool. Let me see if I can just figure that out real quick for you. So Mac SSH. Let's see. So yeah, I have, let's see, using the key log example, which holds the key in the file deployment key.txt and logs in as, yeah, so this is probably what you want to do is you probably want to include the, probably you would call SSH -I, which is would be the input for the key file, and then it would be EC2 user and the URL for your Amazon instance here. So it would probably be this. It would probably be the syntax in Mac and Linux, is my guess. Except this would be whatever your key file is, .pem probably. Okay. Any other questions? You know, and if nothing else, spinning up one of these virtual machines is probably useful just to tinker with things. You know, you could have your own little tiny Linux instance to run services on, to test out projects, that kind of thing. All right. Let's get back to.
Excuse me, Professor. What's the problem of the university when we use it before that? Why we need to use that one?
So why would you want to use this instead of the university web service that was using to host things?
Yes.
So the university like hosting service is pretty locked down. I think you can probably run like PHP files if you wanted to, but otherwise it's mostly just for static content. Like you can't run more dynamic things like Node or other services there. You know, it's an environment that you don't have a lot of control over. Whereas with this, it is, you know, you have root access to these Linux instances that get spun up. So you can configure them however you want to, and you can run whatever services you want on them. You can also open whatever ports you want on those machines, so you can you know, run multiple different services on there. You know, you could run. I'm trying to think of like something else you could do. I think like you can run like TeamSpeak servers, or you could, you know, whatever kind of service you wanted to run on there, you probably could. But just, you know, keep in mind that the performance is not going to be too great on the free tier service ones. But yeah, you do have complete control over it as opposed to the university one, which is more locked down.
Professor?
Mm-hmm.
Here EC2 domain name can we give as our own customized domain name?
So what you would probably need to do for that is to create, if you have like a different hosting service that you control, like you host your own website or something like that, you can probably set up DNS records that point to that domain so that you could create your own domain name that would point there. I want to say, is it DNS CNAME? Alias name to a true canonical. Let's see. Let's see. Canonical name. And should I, let's see. Google Sites. So yeah, I think you can probably use this like CNAME record to basically create another name, another DNS name for that service. So I could potentially try to demo that for you. Let me see if I can figure that out real quick. I need to like log into this web service that I have, and I don't want to like expose everything to y'all. So 1 second. Domains, manage domains. Okay, let's try this out. So start starting this record within a couple of minutes. Okay. Let me just try this and see if it works. So AWS. So I will. Okay, I added this DNS record to my hosting service to basically point at this AWS instance. It looks like it might take a couple minutes to propagate. So I'll come back to that and verify if it works or not. But yeah, I think the thing that you want to do is to create a CNAME DNS record with whatever hosting service you have. If you want to point at something on AWS, you can use a lot of different things for that. Probably it's like GoDaddy. I use DreamHost for things. So
yeah, thank you, Professor.
Yeah. All right. I'm curious if this is going to work. Yeah. Oh well, we will find out later. Okay. Any other questions about EC2? Okay. So the next service we're going to talk about is what's called Amazon S3, which stands for Simple Storage Service. So generally, it's just a very generic data file storage service that Amazon provides. It gives you a way to basically save large files. So say you had like a web service that had like user profiles and like users had like images associated with their profiles. You could use S3 to store those images, and S3 can actually serve those up for your service so that people can load it up. You don't have to worry about configuring all of the files sharing and backup stuff on your servers. S3 basically just handles that for you and has a bunch of tools for setting up access to those. Generally, data in S3 is saved in what are called buckets. So they're just, think of them as big collections of data objects. Within those buckets, you can have objects or files. And I mean, you can think about images, you can think about JSON files, and you can also organize those things into folders. So you could have like a folder that has like all of your like photos that your service is using, or you could have like You know, if you had some other binary data files, you could have those in a different folder, those kinds of things. And so your web application can then create, upload, and access those data objects on S3. So I have a short demo set up for how that can kind of work. So give me just a second to, is this working yet? Not yet. All right. Too many things open. Okay, so AWS example. Do I have this open here yet? Okay. Actually, let's just go, let's look at S3 first before I look at that. Okay. So if I go to services, S3, so the highest level thing in S3 is just what are called buckets, which again are just like big collections of data. So I've set up, if you hit create bucket, basically you pick a bucket name and a region. So we have a bunch of different regions around the world. There's 2 US Easts and 2 US Wests. I've just picked US East for the temporary time being, but US West is one is probably closest to us, that's San Jose. But there are, if you're accessing these, if you're accessing S3 from a service that you have running on like EC2, like you want those to be in the same region, because like data transmission between like your EC2 instance and S3, I think is free as long as it's in the same region. So that's the main consideration that you're going to have. The other, I mean, is obviously like how close the service is to where people are going to probably be accessing it from. So if you're writing a service for the United States, you probably don't want to serve it in Asia or Europe, right? Okay, so this is the bucket I created before with just the name pre-class test 3. So right now it's empty. There's nothing in it. There's some permissions and things you might have to set up, which I will, let's see, what did I think you can actually do a lot of this without setting that up actually. Okay, let me get to my example here. So with this, let me just, I guess, run this example first and then I'll walk through what it's doing. So this one is currently running, is that true? It is, okay. So makes it hard. The Zoom like layover thing makes it hard here, okay. Localhost 3000, okay, so if I go to this node service that I'm just running locally here, I could be running this on my EC2 instance, but I'm just running it locally for the time being. So if I choose file, I can pick some image, hit open, and this is just a very simple form, HTML form, and I hit submit. It's going to upload this file to my server, and the server is going to turn around and put that object in S3 and send me back a URL to where I can access that image file. So if I go ahead and hit submit, my server gets it. It then puts it in Amazon S3 and gives me back the URL. So this URL should be a publicly accessible image on S3. I'll put it in Zoom, which you are probably not too interested. And so if I was writing a service that was using images like profile pictures, or if I was like, writing some sort of social media application, if I wanted to enable people like upload pictures that other people could see, like we could use S3 for uploading these. You could also use it to store things like video files, and it would serve those up. anything like that. So it sort of abstracts away having to manage storage of big data objects on your own servers. And with the free tier service of Amazon, with AWS, I think you can host up to like 5 gigabytes of data or something like that, just to test things out. Okay, so just to give you an idea of how this works, I'm doing this with a Node application. I'm using Express, which you all have seen. I'm serving a static file. Oof, too much stuff over here. So I'm using Express, serving a static file, which is just this index file, which is the form. Okay, so I'm using this middleware called Express File Upload, which basically enables me to accept images coming in from a post request from an HTML form. Just to give you an idea of what's in my form, it's just a very simple form. I have to use this encoding type multi-part form data, but and then I have an input for a file and a submit button. Very straightforward. So this file upload thing allows me just to accept files coming in on a post request. And then I use it as a middleware with Express. Here, this .use file upload. I'm using this config. This is storing some access keys. So whenever you are using an SDK or an API that uses Amazon Web Services, you have to authenticate with the service using a couple different keys. Just to show you where you get those, if you go to your profile and you say My Security Credentials, and then access keys. You can only have 2 of these access keys, and if you hit create new access key, it'll give you like a download file that has the keys in them. I'm not going to show them to you right now because I feel like if one of y'all wanted to, you could blow up my AWS instance and basically cause me to pay out the nose to my credit card for a bunch of stored images or something like that. Please don't do that to me. But what was I going to say? Okay, so basically that key information is here in this .config file that I have. And I configure, so I'm using this Node AWS SDK package. So I set that up here. I say new AWS S3 instance, and I give it the access key and the secret key out of my configuration. So that basically enables me to communicate with S3. All right, and so here's kind of where the magic is happening. So this is the post request that my form uses. So I just form submit. So the middleware that I'm using before, this Express file upload, basically puts the file that is coming in from the post request into the request. So request.files.profile, which is what I named this file in the form here, will contain data for that file. It has things like the original file name. It has the MIME type for it, so what type of file it is. It has like just a big in-memory data buffer of what that file is. I'm creating just a random string to name that, and I'm sticking on the proper extension here. So if it's a .jpeg, I'm basically going to save it as a random string.jpg, or if it's a PNG, it's a random string name.png. So that's what I'm doing here with random name. And then I call s3.putObject. So I specify the bucket name that I'm using, which was this pre-class test 3 bucket. The random name, so that's the name of the object I want to store. So I'm saving that as I'm specifying that as the key for the object that I'm putting. So this body is going to be the buffer of data that I have for the file. So it's just like the raw binary data for the file that I'm receiving. I'm going to put that as the body for the object. This ACL stands for access control list. So I can control like who can access that file. I'm just making it public readable so anyone can see it here. If you wanted to make that, you can configure that to make it more constrained if you wanted to. And then I have the MIME type for the file, which should be like image/JPEG or image/PNG or image/GIF or something like that. Okay, so I call put object, which then uploads that file to S3, and then I get a response back. There will be basically whether or not it was a success or fail in this response. I'm not checking that here. And then you can construct the URL for that piece of file just by like concatenating the bucket name s3.amazon AWS with the name of the object that you put up there. I'm printing that out and then I'm doing this redirect, which redirects the client to that image. So that's why whenever I uploaded it before, it redirected me to the AWS file or the AWS link here for the S3 object. But you could turn around and you could put that object, like if you were uploading a profile image for a user or something like that, you could store the URL for that image and like the user object in your database, or if you were creating some other thing like that, you would basically save the reference to the S3 object there to be served up at a later point. So, and I guess just to, so if I want to like upload some of these other images, like they'll get uploaded, I get redirected. So I'll submit all of these, they get put in AWS. If I go back and look at, where is it? I go back and look at S3. I look at pre-class test 3. You can see these different objects that are showing up in the bucket. And then, I can go, and the links there are links available for those objects here as well. But if I go look at them, they're here. And so, this is just like a very generic way to store data in the cloud that you can access and manage from your web applications. And then Amazon sort of abstracts away all the management of like storing those, as well as backing them up and serving them on the internet. So you don't have to, deal with the details of that yourself. So does anyone have any questions about S3 or how this works? Why you would want to do this?
How to make the folder if you want to make the folder in there.
So here I'm saying like S3 put object. I'm pretty sure there's a, let's see, S3 dot put folder. Yeah, you're gonna have to look at the probably the SDK for how to do that. You can do it here. Like if I wanted to do it, I could just say create folder here, and I could say images. Save, and then let's see. I wonder if I could. And so then inside of that, you could just put more objects to sort of organize things. You can manually create them here, or you could have your service create them. But yeah, you'd have, if you wanted to do it programmatically, you'd have to go through the SDK to figure out how to do that. Let me see if I do Let me just see if this will work. I'm not sure if it will, but if I just do images slash actually gets see if this works. I'm not sure if it will. Choose file. I'll just try uploading this doc again. Okay, so yeah, if we just put in the folder name there, let's see if I refresh this. Okay, yeah, so if I just put in the images, if I just put the file name here in the put object, it'll just put those files in those folders then. So you can kind of organize things that way. And that, again, that just changes the URL to include the slash images here in the key name for the object. So hopefully that answers your question. Let's see, is this available yet? No. 1 second, let me just see if this. Yeah, so evidently that DNS record hasn't populated yet. But anyways, yeah, but if you want to do the folders, you just basically change the key name to include a folder.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions about S3? I'll try to make these examples. I'll try to put these examples up so that y'all can access them if you're interested in using these things. All right. So one last service that we're going to try to set up. So Amazon Lambda basically is an abstracted way of running computations on Amazon. So whereas with EC2, we like spun up a virtual machine that we have to configure and manage and all of those things, Amazon Lambda sort of takes all of that away, where you're not really you're not dealing with the nuts and bolts of like your own virtual machines. It creates a way to basically execute code that is more divorced from like an actual machine. It handles running the code, which gets you some nice things. Like if, you know, this function that basically allows you to create this like web function that you can call. And it does some nice things, like you don't have to worry about managing the server. If you start, you know, hitting whatever function that you have with like millions or billions of calls, like Amazon will like handle all of the scaling in order to like execute that function sort of in the background, and you don't have to like worry about it. However, you know, you might, you know, I'm sure they will charge you money to use it. So just to kind of give you an example of what this looks like, let's see, I have an instance up. So if you go to services, and so this is sort of like a play off of words, or a play off of the name Lambda functions, which is a common thing that you see in different programming languages, which is like, you know, a function that you can like hand around and like basically execute and give things. So I'm going to create a new function. I'm just going to say author from scratch. And let's see. What can we do that would be interesting? I feel like there's a website that's like, is today like Friday the 13th or something? Maybe we could try to do that one. Hopefully I won't fail in this. So is today Friday the 13th. And we'll just say create function. So we create this function, and it sets up this basically hello world example for you to get started from. So if you remember setting up modules with Node.js, this is very similar to that. So we have this, we're doing this with Node. You can set this up with PHP or other execution environments, Python, Ruby, Java, but we're just going to use Node because that's what we've been focusing on in this class. So basically, we just have this exports.handler, which we give an async Lambda function here that has an event. We can use the event to, I believe, take in like data into this function, but we're not going to do that here. So let me just try to this real quick. See if I can try to do this Friday the 13th thing. So let's see, today is Wednesday, and okay. So I think what we can do is our date gets new date, and then I can basically return something like return date.get day equals 5 and date.get. So the get day is like what day of the week it is. So 5 would be Friday, and then get date date.get date is the day of the month it is. So if it's 13, so we'll just return that. So I'll save it, and then we can test it. Okay, sure. Oh, just let's see. Test. So response is false. So that's good. It's not Friday the 13th, but I guess we can check to see if it's the Wednesday the 8th. So that Wednesday's the 3rd. The date would be 8th. So test. Oh, we gotta save. Test would be true. So so we can just run this test real quick. And so one thing and to actually call these functions, you can have what are called triggers. There are a bunch of different triggers that you can get from like S3. I'm assuming like if you add an object, like you get a trigger to like run some sort of function on that object. One example I could think of would be to get a trigger, like if I get a JPEG image, I could run a function that would like resize that image or something like that. But we're going to do this API gateway. So let's see, create an API HTTP API. We're just going to say it's open security. Okay, let's hit add. And then, okay, so basically what this does is it gives us an API endpoint, which is a publicly available URL. We should be able to hit that and we get back true. So we could access that from any service that we wanted to. Let's see if we go back to here, if we change this back to Friday the 13th. And basically this function would be available. We could, you could make a much more complicated function, like I said, like changing image sizes, or if you wanted to run some sort of like complex analysis on a data set or something like that, you can do that here. And Amazon Lambda will basically handle the scaling of this. So this is just a very simple example of using this service. But does anyone have any questions about this? This is like probably the thing that I'm least, one of the things I'm not as familiar with in AWS, but I can try to answer your questions. Okay. Like I said, these services are fairly useful for like actually putting these kinds of projects out on the web. So if you want with your final project to like actually get it out there, you could like spin up an EC2 instance, or you could potentially use that in combination with like S3 if you wanted to save some different types of data, images, some different files, etc. Or if you're trying to create some like publicly available like web API, you could use something like Lambda maybe. But you could also program that up on EC2. If you're wanting to get your AWS Educate account, you can just go to that URL that was just there, or you can just search for AWS Educate. Go here, you can join AWS Educate. You can say you're a student, and then you can specify like what school you're at, your name. I think your email, you have to have a .edu email, which you all should have, when you're going to graduate, and then some other data. And that should be, you should be able to get an account with some basically free money to throw at AWS beyond what you get for the free tier to begin with, if you're wanting to use that for developing your final projects. Okay, so that's pretty much all I have to say about AWS for today. Hopefully these demos were somewhat useful, and you can potentially use that going forward. And I can try to help you figure out what's going on if you're trying to use these and having difficulties as well. I will add that there are other cloud computing services like what is it? Microsoft Azure is very similar to AWS. You can pretty much do the same things that you would do on AWS. You can do that in Azure. The web configuration pages are probably somewhat different. I know they're different, but you can basically do the same things. There's a storage service. There's virtual machine service. You can basically do the same thing in that environment as well. Okay, so like I said, I'm gonna stop recording because that is